Hi, my name is Alex. Welcome to our video lesson on the Back to Basics Guide to Recycling. I work for an organisation called Global Action Plan, and we work with schools, communities, and businesses so that people know a little bit more and feel like they can act a little bit better for a better world. That's really what we're trying to do today with our recycling video. We want to help you understand a little bit more about what really happens when you put something in the recycling. I also want to encourage you to think a little bit differently. I want to give you maybe a different version of the story of recycling than you've already heard before. And then I also want to finish off by imagining new ways that we can deal with this idea of waste. So let's get started with a quiz. Quiz time! All right, are you ready? I want you to pair up with somebody near to you, grab a pen and a piece of paper. You've got 10 seconds. Ready? All right, let's go. Question number one. How many kilograms of waste does each household in Ireland generate in 1 year? I'll give you 10 seconds to answer. Write down a number. All right, question number two. Which European country produces the most plastic waste per year? Okay, question three. Which of these activities has the greatest environmental impact? Effectively recycling for 1 full year, eating vegetarian for 1 full year, or taking one less flight per year? Okay, answer time. So the answer to question number one there, Irish households generated an average of 1,000 kilograms of waste in 2021. So that's each household generated 1,000 kilograms of waste. Question number two, Ireland, surprise, surprise, is the number one producer of plastic waste each year. And in 2021, we produced 65 kilograms per person. Question three, of those three actions, the most impactful thing that you can do is taking one less flight per year. Eating vegetarian is a little bit under that, as it prevents the release of a little bit less carbon dioxide, carbon emissions. But the actually effectively recycling, even if you practice this really, really well for over a whole year, has a very, very small impact on your carbon footprint. If it's not accompanied by reduction in the amount that we're consuming as well. For the purpose of this video, we're going to define recycling as a range of processes that happen to post-consumer products, so waste after you've used it, and when it's appropriately disposed of through the proper channels, through recycling bins at home or in public, say in supermarkets. And the reason I've put a complicated definition on this is because I think we use recycling to mean something that it doesn't necessarily mean. And I'm going to unpack that as the video goes along. There's two stories I want to tell about recycling. And I think the first one is very familiar to us. And it's that recycling is this convenient system to dispose of the unfortunate byproducts of our consumption. So we need to consume, and recycling is just this natural, plastic waste is just this natural thing that occurs as a part of that, and that we need to do something with it, and recycling is a very good solution to that. And I think that's kind of the definition that a lot of people cling to. But I think there's another version of this story that we can talk about with recycling. And this is, we can say that it's maybe a practice where wealthy countries export the problems of their waste management to lower income countries, and that can have devastating impacts on their environments and the health and human rights of their people there. And I'm going to illustrate the second version of the story. Now, I'm not saying that one is better than the other, or I'm just saying that I'd like you to consider both versions of recycling in your head while we move forwards. So I want to take a minute to think a little bit about how our modern systems of plastic recycling came to be. In about 1988, people were starting to become a little bit more aware of the effects of the huge amounts of plastic waste that were being created by consumer behaviour. And stories like this one here outline the effects of plastic waste on our wildlife. So that year, the plastics companies got together. And when I say plastics companies, they're kind of also the big oil companies. Here you've got Dow, you've got BP, you've got Exxon, you've got Mobil. So plastics producers and oil companies tend to be fairly similar companies. And these companies got together, they decided that they needed to do something to respond to the challenges of plastic waste. And what they came up with was this, the plastics resin identification code. This is 7 different kinds of plastic and how recyclable they are and what they're made from. And if you'll forgive me, I'm going to go into this just a little bit because I think this is really interesting and important to understand. So one thing I think that's really important to notice is you see that each of those numbers that's surrounded by those 3 arrows, it looks like the recycling symbol. It looks like these are recyclable, but actually that is just an identification. The number that's inside is an identification as to whether it can or cannot be recycled. I'm going to go into what each of these are very quickly because I think it is important to know. So number 1 is PET, PET, and that's clear plastic water bottles or maybe colored water bottles. Number 2 is HDPE, and that one's also recyclable, and that's kind of a heavier density plastic. And that's things like milk, those kind of milk cartons, the plastic milk cartons. If you get your your laundry detergent, oil bottles, that thicker kind of plastic. Number 5, the other one that is recyclable, is called polypropylene, and that's kind of lightweight but still tough plastic that you can make things like buckets or the packets inside cereal boxes or yogurt containers. Plastic bottle tops are actually made of this one as well. Number 3, that can be recycled is PVC. And that's the one that we commonly find in toys, clear plastic wrapping like cling film, and basically absolutely everywhere. The thing about this one is that there's toxic additives, maybe things like lead, and this is so it doesn't lend itself very well to being recycled. And definitely shouldn't find its way into our environment. Wink, wink. Number 6 is polystyrene. So if you've ever opened up a box, maybe containing some new electrics, that light error board that you have in there is polystyrene. And that doesn't also recycle very well. Styrene it contains is a possible carcinogen. And also I've read that there might be some other chemicals that are associated with disrupting reproductive systems. Number 7 then is just this catch-all term for basically every other kind of plastic that isn't covered by 1 to 6. As you can understand, this is quite a complex system, and I think that's kind of complexity maybe kind of is in its favor and is against it. The complexity maybe convinced people, okay, right, the oil companies, the plastic companies, they know what they're doing. We can trust them with recycling. But it also created problems like wish cycling, which actually, hands up, I'm totally guilty of wish cycling, where it's like you've got something, you're like, is this recyclable? It's kind of plastic. You're like, well, it's a bottle. I'm sure it is recyclable, and you throw it in the bin, and actually, maybe it turns out that it's 3 and not 5 or 1. So the system was just clear enough to make people trust it, but maybe a little bit too complicated to actually make people use it properly. And as you were going to see, this has a whole host of problems. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you. This is your time to shine. Now, for the next 60 seconds, I want you to talk to the person next to you and explain in as much detail as you possibly can what happens to a piece of plastic after you put it in the recycling bin. All right, your 60 seconds starts now. Maybe you said that our waste gets turned into something new. Or maybe you said that it finds its way to a landfill somewhere. Or maybe you think it gets burned up and incinerated. And actually the truth is that all 3 of these things happen. But I want you to take a look at this diagram. It's an image from the Environmental Protection Agency's report into the Irish plastic waste in 2021. I want you to look at it for about 40 seconds, and I want you to get 3 facts. Tell me 3 facts we can take from it. In 2021, 70% of Ireland's plastic waste was incinerated. That means that it was burned and recovered for energy. Plastics are made from fossil fuels, which is ultimately plastics are made from oil, and so they burn real good. And so that means that we can burn them to use them to power cement factories or maybe other recycling plants. It's also really, really important to talk about the opposition, people's opposition, public opposition to these incinerators. There's various incinerators are in various stages of planning permission in Limerick and in Ringaskiddy in County Cork, and there's been a lot of public opposition to those facilities. They allege that there's health issues that those that are unsatisfied by the proposed solutions. We also need to look at this little 2% down here, because this 2% represents things that go to landfill. So even though we're putting things in recycling, maybe some things end up in a bad batch, or maybe they're just really, really far too small to possibly be recycled. So they often find their way into landfills in spite of the fact that we are trying to dispose of them responsibly through recycling. Aha, but you say, what about all the things that get turned into new objects? Well, yeah, about those. So there's 7% of the recycling that we put into the waste bin in Ireland gets turned into something new in Ireland. And this is very, very, very small. And in fact, actually, only 9% of all the plastic that's been produced since 1950 has actually been turned into something new. And even if things are recycled into, say, even if a plastic bottle is recycled into another bottle, there's a limit to the number of times that this can be done before the quality of the plastic degrades. The polymers get shorter and shorter, and you just can't keep recycling things into the same quality of things again and again. So what we do often do is we downcycle. So we turn maybe plastic bottles in the first time around, maybe they turn into bin bags or carpets in a second life. But lots of our waste is exported. In fact, 21%, 13% of our waste exported to other European countries. And this really, really interesting figure of 8% that gets exported to non-EU countries. And the reason that we export waste is a few reasons. First of all, we have a limited capacity because our country is not that big. And plastic recycling is very, very labor intensive. It requires a lot of sorting. It requires a lot of allocating, putting things in the right places. And in a country like Ireland, where people need to be paid a minimum wage, that becomes expensive. Whereas if we can outsource this or externalize this to other countries, then the price of recycling can come down for the recycling companies. Also, what do we do with plastics numbers 3, 4, 6, and 7? We don't have the facilities to do it here in Ireland. So we need to deal with those non-recyclables or deal with those in some kind of safe way, right? Well, let's see. That 13% above that 13% number is plastics that get recycled elsewhere in the EU. But I think that number also might be a little bit misleading, because that just says that we exported 13% of our plastic waste to another EU country. It doesn't say that what happened to it after it was in that country. So there's a very, very good chance that plastic waste that ends up in the Netherlands or in Poland could find its way to another different country. We're about to explore some of the countries that Irish plastic waste ends up in. I want you to just talk to your partner for 10 seconds and name 2 or 3 countries that you think our waste goes to. Time up. What countries did you guess? If you didn't know, it's okay, because actually it kind of seems like no one really does know. And to illustrate this point, I'd just like to tell you about a really, really cool experiment that was done by a journalist from Bloomberg News. He put trackers in three different plastic bags and put them into different recycling bins in Tesco's throughout London. Now, one of them ended up just disappearing in London, but the two of the other ones ended up were brought to the Netherlands and then went to a recycling sorting centre in Poland, and then to a Polish incinerator for a cement plant, and then one of them ended up in a illegal recycling centre in Turkey. And an illegal recycling centre in Turkey. I mean, if that doesn't sound shady, but this just illustrates for me how completely opaque and, like not transparent the system of recycling is, not just in the UK, but, is it also the same in Ireland? Where do the things that we put in the recycling end up? So I think it's important to learn a little bit more about what happens to recycling outside the EU, because at least 8% of our waste goes there, and maybe as much as 20%. And 8%, by the way, of the waste that we produced in 2021 is 29,840 tons. And that's equivalent to six Titanics. That's the weight of six Titanics. And China was really, really important to how our recycling was done in Europe, in the EU, up until fairly recently. Cargo ships that were bringing imports into Europe then went back to China with huge amounts of recycling. And this, there, it was incinerated or processed or turned into new raw materials for the Chinese industry. However, a lot of that ended up being soiled or contaminated, and a lot of it couldn't be recycled, leading to a lot of it being dumped. And this had knock-on consequences for local environments, had serious problems for people's health, which we're going to go into in a second. And this documentary here, Plastic China, highlighted the living conditions of families living and working in these recycling plants. And so I think it kind of had an effect of sort of slightly shifting the conversation and people's perceptions of recycling. The Chinese government stopped accepting European or foreign plastic waste in 2019. So since China has stopped accepting plastic waste, it has to go somewhere else. And it's going to places in Malaysia, in Indonesia, and Thailand, and Turkey is another one of those places that is accepting plastic waste as well. And this is not good news for those countries because it stresses their infrastructure. Remember I said that Ireland is too small and we don't have the facilities to recycle threes and six and sevens? Well, nowhere else does either. And Malaysia and Indonesia and Thailand, these countries don't have better necessarily recycling facilities than us. And also, the recycling that we're sending over to them isn't always good quality. For example, in 2019, Malaysia returned waste to the United Kingdom that included soiled nappies. And some companies are setting up illegal recycling plants in these countries. And this is where things get really shady because it's very difficult to get data around these. And it's unclear how much actually gets turned into new things in these places. But there's a good chance that some or a lot of it is shredded or is burned on site. Okay, back over to you. Talk to the person next to you. Very quickly, do you think it's okay to export our waste to countries like Malaysia and Thailand and Vietnam? Why or why not? The consequences of burning these unrecyclable materials are really well documented. One of the best documented examples is in a town called Jenjarom in Malaysia. And a lot of illegal plastic burning sites were polluting the air. Residents reported feeling unwell, coughing, blood clots, rashes, and peeling skin. If it's not recycled and if it's not burned, then plastic has a tendency to disintegrate into smaller pieces, leaching toxins into the soil or ending up in local waterways. And there's this phrase in environmental justice called sacrifice zones. And this is, I think, a really interesting idea. The idea that modern capitalism needs these sacrifice zones, places where we can just say, actually, nothing good is going to happen here. And we're basically talking about a sacrifice zone here. Sacrifice zones are often inhabited by people of color or maybe by low income communities. And we need these places to hide or to get rid of some of the less convenient features and aspects of our modern system. I don't want to finish by just giving you all these doom and gloom stories because I want there to be some positive things within there as well. And one of the really, really beautiful things I found as I was researching this was the story of litter workers in Pune in India. And they have unionized, they've gotten together, they're advocating for better rights and better working conditions for them and for their colleagues. Another really good news story is like these activists in Malaysia who tracked down the illegal recycling plants in Genjeram and around that area, and then put pressure on their government to do something about it. And their government and many other governments in Southeast Asia are now starting to crack down on this illegal plastic dumping and creating better environments for the citizens of their countries. So, here are the various different people I've talked about over the course of this video. I want you to pick one group and with a partner discuss how they either benefit or suffer, or maybe both, from our system of recycling. Okay, time's up. So if your thought patterns are anything like mine, then you would have discovered that, of course, we are the primary beneficiaries of our system of recycling. We have access to all the goods and all the products that we possibly want, and none of the guilt of dealing with the waste. Isn't it great? And other people who really, really benefit from this are companies who are involved in creating and selling plastic. Essentially the oil companies. But the food companies, food producers, supermarkets are also kind of involved in this as well. And they also benefit from having this good way to deliver food and products to people. And then another person who is making profits out of this is the recycling and waste disposal companies, and they're often these big international chains with feet in lots and lots of different contexts and countries as well. Who suffers as a result of our recycling? People living near incinerators, whose human right to a healthy environment is threatened by the polluted air. People living near illegal recycling centres. We mentioned the danger to food systems and how soil can be poisoned and become more toxic as a result of toxins from plastic leaching into the soil, and also the waterways as well. So the basic human right to have access to good food and healthy water is jeopardized by our recycling system. Those workers that I mentioned in Pune, but maybe before that, maybe if their health is endangered by working in unsafe recycling conditions, and anybody who relies on clean water, air, or land to live. So, I mean, just about everyone. So, time for the big question. What can we do about it? Well, I'm not saying to stop recycling because it's an imperfect system, but it's the best system that we have. But we need to think of other ways that maybe we can act collectively to change that system. So rather than just suggest that you reduce your waste, here are some ideas for some things that we can act together to ask businesses and ask governments and change the systems that we live in. We need packaging that's genuinely recyclable. Things like paper, metal, and glass. We can't keep using plastic. It is not a sustainable material, no matter how much recycling tells you that it is. We also need places to refill bottles and jars. Have you ever seen anywhere like this? You might see them in health food shops where you go and you take your jars and your bottles and you put your lentils or rice or pasta or whatever into those jars. Why aren't those in all supermarkets? Why can't we go into a Tesco's or a Dunnes and completely eliminate our plastic waste by filling things there? So there are simple solutions. We just need people to get on board. We also need stronger traceability on where our recycling goes. I had to research a whole lot to figure out what happened with this system, and still 8% of our rubbish is mostly just guesswork. We need to be able to trace recycling after it's been with us. Another thing we need to do is get rid of this idea of disposability. We can't keep treating things as if we can throw them away. We need to completely eliminate this concept from our language and from our minds. Instead, we need to find ways to continually reuse and repair things. We need to not get anything in the first place that is disposable. And the final thing we need to do is to support anti-pollution activists. Whether in Mungret or Malaysia, we need to stand in solidarity with people who are taking action for their local environment to try to protect the spaces in which they live. If you want to do some more research into the topic, why not visit the website of some of these organisations? You can find them in the slides or the teacher's notes that you can download underneath this video. So I'm done talking at you. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I just wanted to leave you with a final task, because I thought it might be really, really good to get some of your ideas and see where you're coming from with this. So your challenge, if you choose to accept it, is to design a completely new school that creates absolutely zero waste. And some things you might think about: where does food come from? What do students need to use to study? Do they need books? Do they need pens and pencils? How does the school keep objects in good condition? What services maybe support repair and reuse? So you're going to design a school over the next 10, 15 minutes, or maybe a couple of days, I don't know. And you're going to tell me how you eliminate waste. And if you do that, I'd love for you to share your ideas with us. We can be found on all of the social media accounts and at Gap Ireland. You can also get at the Irish School Sustainability Network on Irish Susty. And you can also use the hashtag Climate and Nature Summit. Please share your ideas with us. I would love to see what a zero waste school looks like. Thank you so much for listening. See you again soon.